Oh, don't do that. Okay, we can probably get started here. Let me get my screen open. Good morning. This is the morning, afternoon, evening, depending on your time zone. This is the weekly VOLTHA TST meeting. And okay, so we have a couple of announcements and a couple of items to go over today. Just so you know, yesterday some changes were made. They're all for the good. Some new resources were brought online for the project. So we now have two brand new mailing lists for broadband. One is announced at list.voltha.org, and the other one's discussed at list.voltha.org. The two mailing lists that have been used, from time of ONF, these have been deprecated. The lists are no longer functional. Sirkan, if you try to respond to the message I sent, you're going to get probably a response back. I did include, Sirkan sent me a question that was sent to the list, and let me see, I did include the new mailing list on the replies, so we should be able, everybody should be able to see any correspondence that goes back and forth. So yeah, we have, was somebody going to say something?
Yeah, Joy, do we need to register to this new mailing list, or somehow the old list will be moved to the new one? The members of
Michelle can chime in, but I believe the old, if you have a Linux Foundation account for VOLTHA, that would be the authentication if any is required. And
you'll have to sign up for the new list because of GDPR. We have to have everybody opt in for the new mailing list. So we'll send out announcements to the old lists with pointers to the new ones. But people will have to opt back in for the new mailing lists because that's how our data privacy works.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
The other question that I'd like to bring up for this is there a desire to bring over all of the old mailing list info into the new mailing list? So like any of the old messages we can move over. It is a horribly difficult and annoying process. So I just wanted to make sure that, there is value in it before going through all that extra work. If there isn't a lot of value, then I prefer we'll just leave the old mailing list in a deprecated state, so it won't be active, but it'll still be accessible. People can still find it. It's publicly available on the internet, but we just won't move the old content over.
If it will be accessible to me, we don't need to, bring everything to the new list.
Okay. That would be much easier. But yeah, we'll send out a notice to all the old lists, letting folks know about the new channels. So that way it's discuss at list.voltha.org instead of discuss it or VOLTHA discuss it open networking. So we're just kind of getting away from those old ONF emailing lists.
I believe you can browse that through Google as well. The URLs, I think, are on the old agenda page. Okay. So this isn't really new, but we do have, it's been announced a few times, but we do have a new wiki page for broadband. You go in, poke around. It's still being filled out. Like there's a link for the governance page and a link for the elections that are coming up. Okay, and the last item.
Joy, sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
Who has access or who has rights to edit this page or add new pages to this wiki?
As far as am aware, and Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong, as long as you're part of broadband, the Volta Devs group, and you have a Linux Foundation login, you should be able to get in and modify content. I don't believe there's any restrictions on the project pages. You obviously probably will not be able to go in and modify the governance page, but you should be able to get in and edit content.
Okay, so this means everybody has the right to edit this page. So is it? That has LF account. So I can edit this page.
I'll
Yeah,
say,
so
go ahead.
Mahir, if you want to go in and start adding more content, the wiki is supposed to be collaborative, just like the ONF wiki was.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to go in and add content. The only thing I've made non-editable just so that it doesn't get confusing is both the governance page and the TST page, but those are just because, or the TST elections page, because those need to be internally updated. But like the information on Volta, if you want to add some diagrams or add additional links, like please feel free to go in and fill it out. I've been doing it as I have time, and I know Joey's been doing it as he has time, but we're both a little busy, so any additional information would be great.
Okay, and I understand that there is no approval or review, etc. process. So if I edit it, then it is edited.
There's a little bit of a feedback loop, though it's a bit delayed. When you go in and modify the pages, well, all of the content that's put in is under revision control, so we can actually go back through history and retrieve old pages if we need to. But when the pages are edited, there is a link toward the bottom that you can specify notify watchers. Whenever page content is edited, everybody that's chosen to watch it will get notified of updates. So that's kind of a review process if anybody needs to look it over.
Okay.
You get it, I think it comes through an email too. And with the pages, you can choose to receive like a summary weekly or a summary daily of all pages within a space if you want to see everything, not having to sign up for individual pages.
There is also a way to use the wiki as similar to like Google Docs where you can add comments so that if you're not sure about an edit you want to make, you can add it in as a comment or a suggestion and then, have it reviewed. You can tag Joey or tag somebody else who you want to have look at it before it becomes actually permanently part of the page. So that's also an option.
And if you want to notify somebody too, you can mention it's @ and like, well, if I do Michelle, she'll explicitly, or with whatever content you put into either so if you add, let me try and speak English here. If you add @user, either in comments or if you edit a page and put in @Michelle, the person that you reference in either the edited document or in the comments will receive when you save, will receive a copy of whatever changes that are being made. So you could like inline a question here, would this be appropriate? And yeah, so you can do the feedback loop that way as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, the last mention, this is in the wiki page, obviously, but the TST agenda page has been moved from Google Docs. It's under the archive section, and we now have this wiki page to edit. So if anybody would like to add agenda items, feel free and come in and add whatever you'd like to. Okay, so for new items, Sakant had sent me, I mentioned this just a minute ago, Sakant had sent me a request and some question. So I guess we have, he'd like to bring up, there were some new activities and updates going on around the LF BBB Tiger team. If you'd like to jump in,
Yes.
Sakant.
Yeah, I want to give what's going on on the BBF side. So can I share my screen?
Sure.
It's better.
Okay, it stopped.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, if you remember, we restarted the BBF and LF alignment Tiger team like a couple of months ago. And before that, we have identified some alignment points between the SIBA platform and the Cloud CO platform. So like we decided that two integration points interfaces can be aligned between the BBF and the LF SEBA. So to do that, just a second. Okay. So to do that, the first action item we had was what could be done on the BBF side. So we are preparing a contribution to the BBF side that is possible to integrate LF-SIBA interfaces into the BBF interfaces. So there needs to be a couple of changes in WT477 document regarding with the VOLTA. This is not done yet, but we are planning to do it. Another point we are working on this virtual OMCI. We identified what is similar in the BBF sides and what are the differences between LF and BBF. So we are also looking for what could be done to align virtual OMSI parts between these two reference designs. So my question is actually, so we are going to update some BBF documents, but we also need to update the SEBA RD document. But how do we do that? How to change the BBF document? I'm sorry, LF document. Who is going to review it? I don't know. To those questions, I'm seeking answers. So if anybody
I
points me,
know, yeah, I know the old ONF process for releasing new reference designs, and there's a review period. I'm not sure how that will translate now that it's at LF, but I will look into it and get back to you. Is there a timeline when you wanted to try to get these updates done by?
Not necessarily. So as soon as possible, I can say, but we don't have any strict timeline for that.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be great for me.
Yeah, and I can probably provide you a copy of the editable version of the last reference design, so you can just go in and update it without having to redo the entire thing.
Yes, I
Let
would
me see if
also
I can
need
track
that.
that down.
Okay, thank you.
Is there still a reference design team?
So the reference design team was representatives from all the different ONF members who were involved in using SIBA, like Deutsche Telekom and Turk Telekom. And so it was all reviewed by different representatives from those companies, some of which are probably still the same, and some of which have moved on to other things. So I think that's another thing to take into account is who should have input on the updated version of the SIBA reference design. So if you can think of those stakeholders and send me a list of who you think should have input, we can also put that together. Yeah, the old one is on ONF website. You can actually pull up, and I think it's like the second or third page of the reference design lists everyone who had input and review, put it together, and then we put it out to the ONF community for, I believe, a month for community review and any additional input. But it's, yeah, I keep going, revision. So we'd update this, and then these were all the folks who kind of had input and put it together and drafted it for review. So
we still have the same people around at least.
some of which I think are on this call. So if anybody else has additional context, please chime in. I just remember it from the review process side of things.
Actually, I don't have any information about the reference design team or preparation or review, etc.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look into it and I'll get back to you folks. But if you can review this list of previous contributors, if there's folks who are same or need to be updated, let me know.
Okay.
Okay. And Joy, I will also reply as an email to your question, but this meeting notes, LFBBF Alignment Target Team meeting notes can be accessed in the wiki.broadbandforum.org, but you need to be a member of the BBF. I don't know as LF members also access to this BBF, but in the past, I remember Andrea was able to access to these pages and edit these pages as far as I remember. Oops. Okay, I lost it. I don't know this wiki. Oh, okay, here. Okay, so it's under come on. These are the shortcuts, but where are the rest of the okay. Now I got page 3. BBF work areas under SDN and NFV. And here is the LF broadband, SIBA, and BBF collaboration page. And the meeting notes can be accessed here.
I don't know if you want to make them available, but if they are protected by being a member of an Atlassian group that allows you in to see the broadband meeting notes, if you want to mention them in the TST agenda wiki as a breadcrumb trail, so people can at least find the document. After that, individually, I don't know, it shouldn't block it. Confluence has the ability to grant edit access to individual users. So if like a handful of people that were not part of the broadband forum needed to edit the document or see it, I believe you can add them individually to be able to edit the page, but that that would just be a
Probably,
config change. Well, if you want to send me the URL for that, I can at least add it in the
Yes, I will.
TST wiki then.
Let me put it to the at least on the chat for now.
All right. Whoops.
Okay, this is all I wanted to share.
Okay. If you could just do stop your
Okay.
screen share, yeah. And oops. Bear with me a second. Screen share.
Oops, stop sharing this.
Yeah. That's better. Okay. Can't type today. Okay, so the last item I have before we jump into the floor discussion is around Jenkins and recreating the AMI images. I've got a bit of a status update for that one. So I started a status tracking page on GitHub. It's a little rough right now, but I'll be adding more repositories in here. I mentioned this before. I've been able to build both Volta Protos and Volta LibGo locally on the machine. And I've also been able to build Volta Docs and a couple of other repositories. A second AMI image has been created that we used, or a second AMI has been created that we use to create the Jenkins nodes, the actual systems that we build things on. The first one was a prototype, and I had to create it with just a small disk, and that started filling up when you start building some of the test repositories and things like that. So we have a brand new AMI created. It has more processors, more RAM, and a larger it's like a 30 gig disk on it. So it should have plenty of space to be able to build things. And within the image, and I've got this kind of a cookie cutter now, so we can recreate these pretty easily, but most of the interpreters, the tools, everything versioned on the new AMI image, we're using the same versions that were being used for both of the Volta 2.12 release. I am upgrading a few different tools like the Helm tool to do charts, or the Helm tool to run testing, and peripheral things like the JQ command for parsing JSON files, things like that. So there are fewer that are being updated. So as for the actual builds and getting the new AMIs into Jenkins, there's been a couple of other problems come up, but they're not horrible. I just got to figure these out. So Volta Protos, when you try to build a job through Jenkins, there's a really strange Docker failure that's coming up. I get permission denied talking to the socket, trying to write to mounted file systems or mounted directories, things like that. This is very bizarre because that problem is generally caused by the build user not belonging to the Unix group that Docker uses. And I've got the account I've got set up is a member of that, so that shouldn't be a problem. And I've been able to log into the machine and build manually. So if there was a problem with Unix groups, that should fail in exactly the same way. But the behavior I'm getting right now is locally I can build and test without issues, but whenever I try to run a job from Jenkins, there are these permission denied problems showing up. It's all the same old makefile commands. It's the same user ID. I have to double check the group ID, but there's nothing obvious that would be causing it. So I've still got to poke at that. Volta LibGo ran into the same problem, but in a different place. It did not have a socket problem. This one was actually having problems interacting with mounted directories when we're trying to regenerate the Go modules, Go mod verify and stuff like that. Let me see, Volta Docs, there's some content problem that's going to need to be cleaned up. There's a link check linting tool that VOLTHA docs jobs run. That's currently failing on some of the URLs that are within the repository. Some have probably gone stale and there's some syntax problems that'll need to be cleaned up. One other problem that showed up when I was building VOLTHA OpenLT adapter, and this is the patch in the job if anyone wants to go look. Two commands are not found for this pipeline job. One was the kubectl command, and there was another strange error around voltctl. I'm working on fixing these. What was kind of odd about these is the pipelines were actually working by coincidence. These pipelines were relying on jobs that ran earlier or tools being manually installed on the machine. Like the kubectl command specifically, a copy of kubectl on the old AMI had been copied into user local bin. That's kind of hit or miss because we can use the kubectl command from user local bin, but it's not being maintained. So what version are you actually running of these tools? So I'm trying to get these missing pieces back in so we can build this. One of the answers, I'm adding a new makefile in the CI management repository. This behaves a lot like the kale command that's in both the system tests. Basically, this makefile adds a target that we can install the kale command, the kubectl command locally at a known version, so we always know what command version that we're using. And the nice thing about this is at release time, we can freeze the version of the command we're using. The tools are versioned along with the code release, so everything just kind of works properly. Let me see. So the big blocker right now is this Docker permission denied error. That's the only thing that's keeping the VOLTHA protos and probably a lot of any of the jobs that interact with Docker. That's the only thing that's affecting them right now. So I'm trying to get that straightened out. If anybody's seen this outside of the Docker group membership, let me know, because this is really kind of strange. And that's pretty much what I have for Jenkins right now. If anybody has any questions or and you'll be able to look up here at this GitHub page. I'm going to try and keep track of status and problems up here as well.
Okay, Joey, on this earlier you had tried it locally, is it? It works locally, but only in the pipeline that starts showing this issue.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And the only real difference with that, if you log in locally, you're working interactively, and you can run all the commands. I'm basically doing make build and make test, which that's the same thing that Jenkins is doing. The only thing different with Jenkins is it's running it through an SSH call. So literally user UIDs, GIDs, permissions, everything is the same, which is why this is kind of strange.
Okay.
And I don't think the mounted file systems are all running local, or the mounted directory, God, I can't talk. The directories mounted by Docker are all local on the machine where Docker is running. So we shouldn't be having like firewall issues blocking access to the mounted file systems or anything like that. In fact, we'd see a different error than permission denied.
Okay.
But aside that, the new image seems to be working, fine for the most part. And I have noticed a couple of problems that were showing up with the older AMI. They don't seem to be manifesting in the new one, so that was good as well.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, yeah, if anybody has any ongoing questions about any of this or status of repositories coming online or things like that, just let me know. With that, the floor is open for discussion. If anybody would like to bring anything up.
Just throw out another reminder that the TST election is open for nominations and the deadline to submit nominations is tomorrow. So please send me anyone you would like to nominate for the 2 open positions.
Okay. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up?
Joy, is there any update about the co-location site?
No update on that.
Okay.
Let's see. So second call for any questions or items you'd like to bring up.
Yeah, hey, Joey and all, that's Manuel of Deutsche Telekom.
Hi.
I actually had a similar question on the co-location and the connection in between. So I think there it looks like there's like a more severe issue. Are we able to isolate that, or could you describe what exactly the issue is? Is this something with regards to having multiple projects being using the infrastructure, and now it is like separated, but I still I didn't fully get the point where the where the problem is. So
Okay.
if you
It's not a technical problem. It's more of a budgetary problem. Well, legacy cleanup and budgetary problem would probably be the way to phrase it. So traditionally, the way the connection to the DT lab has been handled, ONF spun up a co-location. Oh, sorry, the phone's ringing downstairs. So a co-location was set up, and the co-location was acting as the endpoint for the VPN that was connecting to the lab over in Berlin. So basically, Jenkins would be running on the ONF side. We would connect to the Jenkins would connect through to Berlin through the co-location, and just the network traffic would pass through the co-location. So with hold on one sec, somebody's calling me. Sorry, just lost my train of thought. Since ONF has become part of Linux Foundation, going through and trying to deprecate some of the resources that were used that are no longer needed. So basically, there wouldn't be a monthly expense for the co-location resources. What that will be replaced with is simply probably a VPN tunnel from California, wherever, so the Jenkins server will be able to connect to it. And the end of the VPN tunnel will terminate over in Germany. And we should be only need to update the end of the VPN, the endpoint for the VPN in the rack that's in the DT lab to connect to the end of the new VPN tunnel, rather than having the co-location terminate at the VPN or at the DT lab. So it's basically just cutting the co-location out of the equation and replacing that with a VPN tunnel through AWS.
Okay. So the CI infrastructure in Jenkins that runs on AWS, and instead of going through the Colo VPN, if I may call it like that, we would need a direct VPN from that Linux Foundation broadband virtual infrastructure with the tools and go into the Berlin community lab directly.
That's correct. At least for the CI infrastructure, nothing really is going to change. All we're doing is changing the conduit that the traffic flows from California to the DT lab.
Yeah, let's call it Berlin Community Lab, since technically it doesn't actually go into the DT lab. It goes directly into the Linux Foundation broadband community infrastructure, which is actually, there's no DT or nothing else involved. So it is all in the hands of Linux Foundation broadband at this point, I think. So there is the virtual infrastructure as you've described it. So Colo gets, gets kind of decoupled and given up, understood. And the endpoint in the DT, DT hosted community infrastructure is, I think, is available. So now, what exactly is a like blocker, or where does it stack?
Going through the part of it is going through the co-location and finding all of the connections, all the IP addresses and the routing, to be able to change that over from passing through the co-location out into this new AWS VPN once it's set up.
But didn't you say that this gets disconnected and then there's just a direct VPN, like two endpoints, right? AWS to the Berlin Community Lab. Isn't there a problem about like IP networking and having to deal with a lot of like address plans or whatever and whatnot, which maybe previously was the case with the co-location, which was managed by ONF. And after that is like disconnected, and the AWS connects directly to the Berlin site. I still don't see like where exactly there is like a problem to establish a VPN between like those two defined sites. One is remote, the other one is a physical, a VPN endpoint running on a server in the Berlin infrastructure.
Correct. The traffic is routed through through a VPN right now, so it's on a private network. We just need the VPN tunnel to spin up the replacement tunnel. The two tunnels, the existing Colo and the new VPN will run side by side for a little while, and then there's just going to be the activity of moving the traffic passing through the Colo over to the new VPN. There may need to be some IPs updated here and there, but yeah, it's just sitting down and doing the work.
Okay, and who's on that right now?
We're trying to round up some people on the Linux Foundation side. Some of us supposed to be poking into it.
Okay, I see. So, but sounds like pretty much, I mean, if the co-location is not supposed to be maintained anymore, right? Is that the right understanding?
Yes. Eventually it'll be turned off with the intent to not have that monthly expense.
Yeah, and if it's not working right now, then I don't see how, like, I mean, it should be like a fairly like short time of downtime, right, for this VPN by replacing it, meaning setting up a new VPN, which actually comes from AWS and goes to the Berlin site. So it's probably just figuring out how, what solution actually would be appropriate to do that. And from the perspective of who can administer that, it is actually not something where DT can help, since the infrastructure is in the hand of the community. So TST and community obviously, have the admin. I think, Joey, actually, you would be the representative on behalf of the VOLTHA community. So you would have the admin rights to, to determine IP address or VPN solution and such. So otherwise, if there is any, any help or support and any questions around lab networking, I'm happy to check out with our local DT lab team, which, as said, has nothing to do with the island within, which is completely under the auspices of the community, right? But if you need some discussion on what are the potential solutions, I think the only point we are not having insights into is how is AWS currently configured and set up. So that should have been actually done as part of the handover from ONF to Linux Foundation at the time of the where the infrastructure got handed over. So I would actually approach this if I make a proposal, right, from a perspective of is there a lack of expertise right now? So can the community help? If you're looking like at Linux Foundation, of course I understand it would be great to have somebody understanding this infrastructure. On the other hand, if it's not possible to be managed, it's actually not existing, right? So then it can be torn down and set up like a new one. So would that be a more straightforward way to solve that?
Well, two things. The co-location VPN is still active right now. We can run jobs across it.
Okay.
Part of the, I'm just trying to think of how to answer this. Part of the delay is there's going to be some research needed in the co-location because we're still figuring out where things are in there. And that's part of it, is the connections, the routing, to get that stood up.
And in addition, and Manuel, there's nobody that can access to this infrastructure or have the rights to access this infrastructure other than the LF people.
Yeah.
This is out of the policy
Understood.
of the Linux Foundation. So community actually cannot help with that.
Just general, I don't know if this was mentioned before. Linux Foundation doesn't generally share, well, not generally, they don't share sysadmin duties for networks and labs, in part because they've been burned too many times in the past with people making changes and not notifying them about it. Then when problems hit the fan, they have to go figure something out only to find out something was changed without announcing it. So that's part of the problem. We couldn't just hand access over to part of the community to dig into the into the higher networking layer, or not higher layer, into the networking around the co-location.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that this should be taken care of by the community. Actually, I think the community is happy having the service of Linux Foundation. However, it sounds to me like we're 2 months into that. And if we can figure out like what the thing is, then for me, it's non-existent, right? So it has to be like pretty much given up and replaced, because an infrastructure that nobody can manage, to me sounds like it's it doesn't exist, right?
It's not a function of being able to figure it out. There's too many things going on right now.
Okay.
Right now, all of the Jenkins servers are down because there was somebody mistakenly deleted an AMI a little while ago. Stuff happens. Things were being cleaned up, and the assumption was that the AWS AMI was no longer needed, when in fact it's the core for all of the one of the ones that were removed is the core for all the VOLTHA jobs. So basically, in order to get Jenkins working again, we've got to recreate an AMI image from scratch. So this is going on, in tandem with migrating everything over to the Linux Foundation and decommissioning the co-location. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now. That's not an excuse.
I think I get it.
Yeah. It's not
And
an
don't
excuse.
get me wrong. I wasn't Yeah, I wasn't meant to criticize. It's I can understand it's a complex thing to run this migration. It's typically more complex than setting up things like into the greenfield, right?
Yeah.
However, it sounded like if it takes too long or is too difficult to actually kind of like re-engineer or reverse engineer this co-location for any reason, then it sounded to me like we actually don't need it anymore. It's supposed to be given up anyway. So the only thing that needs to be figured out is what is a viable VPN connection that can be actually replacing the current one that for whatever goes through co-location, because there used to be many more lab sites originally being routed. So there was like probably like a virtual infrastructure prepared to connect multiple sites to the Santa Clara lab, and the virtual infrastructure with the tools. So as we don't have that anymore, and we are looking at giving up the colo, for one point I was just trying to look at this like simple possibility at hand to say what will be the replacement for that, rather than trying to understand and re-engineer that.
Yeah, and I just to chime in, Manuel, too, that I've been bugging the LF head of IT about if there's any other approaches we can be taking or additional LF resources that we can bring in. Joey was making headway for quite some time, and then with his upcoming retirement, now there's been a shift to trying to bring in someone to take over what he's been doing, as well as like for him to be documenting everything, all the many things that he does for VOLTHA, so that the replacement has an idea of what's going on. So not as much progress has been made on the VPN issue as we would have liked, but I do know that Andy, who is Joey's direct reporting person at LF, is working on bringing the right people in to get that VPN figured out so we can shut down the colo site, and additionally bring in additional resources to try to get the whole lab situation worked out.
Okay, thanks, Michelle and Joey, for clarifying. That sounds good. So what I was actually able to offer, and of course that is something where I would have to check it out internally too, but we do have in the Berlin DT lab, which is actually making the outer shell, right, which of course has still also all kinds of expertise around VPNs and networks. So if there's any help that we can provide, that doesn't mean taking over administration of this infrastructure, not at all. But if there's any expertise that can help, like to facilitate this discussion, like how can a VPN look like that connects these, now only just two endpoints. So to me, it sounds like a fairly simple problem to approach. And if there's any help that on the expertise or discussion can be provided, I would be happy to try to figure it out if people would be available, maybe to jump on a call or so. If you have the people on the Linux Foundation side that could get any help or even discussion. So obviously, on the Berlin lab side, everything is stable, meaning there hasn't been any changes. So from that perspective, there's a server in a rack where the VPN terminates. And in my mind, it's just about like connecting this server with an appropriate VPN tunnel to the AWS. So it doesn't sound like terribly complex.
Joey, can you take that proposal back to Andy and see if that's an option?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if that helps, maybe speeding up, like, or just getting kind of like the some obvious questions also somehow getting discussed. Of course, it might be that I'm really overlooking something, since obviously I'm not an expert in lab networking. So I'm looking at it from a fairly like maybe abstract level, but I'm just asking the question since it looks like the infrastructure actually got simplified. So if it was the other way around, I would understand, right? If you wanted to set up like a co-location site and or keep on using it.
Yeah.
And making it, like improving it, but it looks like we are actually about just to cut it off and make sure we have a well-working replacement. So yeah, if there's any help that could be provided, just feel free to reach out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to Andy about it. Let's see. So the floor is still open for discussion. If anybody has any more colo or VPN items they'd like to talk about, we've got about 6 minutes left. Or if you have anything in general that you want to cover.
If I may, just maybe a bit of a follow-up question. While the Linux Foundation, of course, has the administrative control, and it should be like it is, right? It should stay like this is. That's the right thing. Do we have a documentation about this AWS and the tools and Jenkins and whatever and whatnot? So, in a way, just to have an understanding of what the nuts and bolts are that are in play there. Maybe also a question to the larger TST.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think we have any document about the co-location site or the infrastructure.
Some of the general lab setup is documented on VOLTHA docs. Co-location, we've kind of been documenting things as we've been going through it, but it is in at least that stuff, IP addresses are in a public repository, or not a public repository, a private repository. That's content you can't really publish, especially for private VPNs, because it ends up being an attack vector for miscreants on the net to go after your network if they know internal ports or internal IPs and things like that. If there's any,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. If there's anything that would be helpful to document, we could try and make sure that, as long as it doesn't expose anything, we can try and make sure it's either there or dig it up if it's already documented somewhere.
Okay, I see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left if anybody has anything. If not, we can probably call it a day. Okay. With that, I guess thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, yep. Joey and all.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.